So if I just play this video right now, it's at its full speed. And we have to just slow this down. So we're only going to focus on that right now. Right, so now the thing is, this video has been shot at 120 frames per second, right? And we need to slow it down. So how you slow down the video is that I can just right click on this video here and I can just go to speed duration and then I can just slow it down. For example, I can slow it down to 50% and then it's going to just become half of the speed that what it was. So let's look at this. You can see that this is kind of just starting to give us that slow motion effect. That's how easy it basically is. But there's just a very simple calculation involved in order to get the correct speed that you should be using, and which is very easy. So the thing is that we're mostly working with 24 frames per second. Right? We've already seen that that is the frame rate that we want to work with, and that is the frame rate that we'll also be exporting this video on. So later on in the course, only in this course, in the editing section, I'll be showing you how to export your video. That is how to get your video absolutely ready to just view. And most of the times you'll just be kind of exporting the video at the same frame rate that you shot the video at, right? But like, for example, in this case, that won't be the case, because ultimately we have to slow down this video. So even though this has been shot at 120 frames per second, we want to turn this video to 24 frames per second. That's how we're going to slow it down. So it's going to involve a very, very basic calculation, which is that we just have to find out how slow is going from 120 to 24. So 120 is 5 times 24, right? So 5 into 24 is your 120. That means, we can easily reduce the speed by 1/5. That will give us the absolutely correct slow motion, because that would mean that we are fitting that amount of frames when we stretch this to 24 frames per second. So you can see that whenever we reduce the speed, like I did before, so last time I only did by 50%, but you can see whenever I reduce the speed, this kind of stretches. So it's going to have all those frames together. So if we reduce it exactly by, not by 50%, but exactly by 1/5, that is going to be 20%. So when we're converting a 120 FPS to 24 FPS, we're going to slow down this clip to exactly 20%, and that is going to give us the smoothest possible motion without any issues of jerky movement or anything, because we are not skipping any frames. It's all going to be smooth because we are absolutely filling that stretched line with all the frames. So I can just make this down to 20%. And you can see this stretches, it makes your video now longer, but this is going to run very smoothly because we have those many frames to slow it down to 20%. So let's just look at this video. You can see this is absolutely perfect. Like, there's no, you don't get the feeling that a frame is being skipped or is there some choppiness to the video. So once again, you just notice the part here. Let me just go full view. Just look at the smoothness of this motion. You don't get too much of motion blur. You don't get all these things. Very, very smooth slow motion. That's because we've, got it down to exactly what we should have. That is 20%. But one mistake that people can make is, they might say, okay, this is slow and this is nice, but I wanted to even go slower. And so what they can do is, because you can take this value down to anything. So you can actually, I can also go down to, let's say, 10%. But if you look at this time the length extends. That means it almost becomes 32 seconds, and it's going to be slower, but keep an eye on this. This time you'll find that it's not very smooth because we don't have that many frames to slow it down to 10%. So just look at this. Can you see that? You start to see this bit of this, motion blur and all these things, which doesn't look good in slow motion because you basically don't have enough frames to work with. So, you're kind of seeing that blur and it just looks a bit choppy, not very, very smooth as compared to 20%. So can you answer if I were to ask you what, in this case, for example, in this case, what could have allowed us to shoot at 10% and even get a slower, smooth motion? So the answer to that is that in that case, we would have needed a camera that could have shot at 240 FPS. So if that was the case, we could have slowed down this video even to 10% and even made a slower video. But usually 240 FPS is not available on most of these DSLRs and mirrorless cameras. So 120 is usually the max you can go. Of course, there are cameras which can go even up to 1000 FPS, even more. But I'm just talking about the main cameras are going to be this. So at least to 20% you can easily slow down very, and make it look really good. So that's just how simple this process is, that you basically just have to click one button, enter the value, which in this case was 20%. You can calculate if you're shooting, let's say, at a different frame rate. Let's say you don't have a camera that allows you to go to 60 FPS to 120 FPS, and let's say most cameras will allow you at least to go to 50 FPS or 60 FPS. So let's say if you were to shoot at 50 frames per second, in that case, to get the smoothest slow motion, you'll just decrease your the speed by 50%, because roughly 50 FPS for 24 is half of 50. So that's how you can calculate, what exactly is the speed that you should be using. Don't unnecessarily slow down the video too much, because then it's going to have this bad looking effect. Also, I remember that in this video I had just there was one sequence in which the video played in reverse, so that is also done from the same part. You can just click on reverse speed and this is just going to reverse your video. So I just thought I'll just show you that bonus tip since it was in the same window. So this is how slow motion works. I hope you like this video. I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.